Chairman Kim has told me that North Korea is already destroying a major missile engine testing site. That's not in your signed document. We agreed to that after the agreement was signed. That's a big thing. For the missiles that they were testing, the site is going to be destroyed very soon.
President Trump earlier this morning in Singapore announcing new agreements by North Korea to work toward a denuclearized Korean peninsula. Joining the conversation right now is former independent Senator Joe Lieberman, former chairman of the Homeland Security Committee and a former Democratic vice presidential candidate himself. Senator Lieberman is currently the chairman of United Against Nuclear Iran. And Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Maria. Good to be here.
I want to get your reaction. Was this a success as far as part one? But I also want you to compare this process that has taken place with North Korea to what took place with Iran, as well as then the president pulling out of the Iran deal. Tell us.
Glad to. Okay, first, I think the summit in Singapore was a success. Now, some people will say, I've been interested overnight. President Trump is getting criticized from left and right, which makes me feel good, actually. But the point is, how much can you expect from the first meeting between two nations that have been totally separated, two leaders who were hurling verbal lightning bolts at each other just about 6 months ago? Yeah. So I think overall, the wording in the communique, denuclearization, which Kim agreed to say in response in return for security from the U.S. and prosperity for the people of North Korea, all good. What is the relevance to the Iranian negotiations? President Trump has been a real critic of that agreement. I agree with him. In some ways, what the Obama administration and our European allies did with the Iranians is a template for what not to do here. Don't look like you want an agreement more than the other side does. Don't settle for just temporary denuclearization. Have the inspections be robust, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot more work to do. Secretary Pompeo is going to have a very important role here, but the world looks a little brighter this morning.
So what about you, Mary? What do you think in terms of the Iran deal versus what you saw here?
Well, and I'm curious to hear the Senator's reaction to this as well. In the Iran deal, we gave up all of our leverage, which was the economic sanctions that brought Tehran to the table.
Right.
I thought it was encouraging that Trump said this morning that he would keep the maximum pressure campaign on. I think that's absolutely terrific and the right thing to do. My question for you, Senator, is that you have three actors here that may undermine that: China, Russia, and South Korea, our Democratic ally, who's headed by a very dovish president.
Right.
Are you concerned about that they may work to erode our sanctions regime and our stick on the North Korean regime?
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern, certainly for the Russians. Maybe not for the Chinese, probably not for the South Koreans, because they really want this process of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula to work. You make a very good point about the Iranian precedent, which is we gave up our leverage. I was in Congress over all those years. We adopted the sanctions on Iran. Why did we do that? To pressure them to come to the table and give up their nuclear weapons. And basically what the agreement that was signed did was to give up the sanctions, and they gave up, they put the brakes on their nuclear weapons program, but never gave it up. We can't do that again. There are a lot of players here, but I must say that President Trump engaging with North Korea now puts the U.S. back in the middle of this part of Asia, and I think probably to some extent certainly unsettles the Russians, and maybe to a certain extent the Chinese as well.
Yeah, but we should point out that the Russian foreign minister this morning said that he applauds the fact that the president said that they are stopping the military exercises. So that was my next question to you. Are you concerned that we're stopping the military exercises with South Korea?
I'm not, because it's a gesture by the U.S. The South Koreans and Japanese, our allies, #1 allies in the region, are agreeable to having us do that because they so want to see denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. If this doesn't go right and the spirit that was evoked in Singapore is not implemented, we can put those war games back on in an instant.
So you're not worried about readiness then?
No,
stopping.
we're going to be ready, and we are ready. We're much more ready, obviously, than the North Koreans. I thought it was a measured way to go. I want to point out what was just said. It would have been a lot worse if we had pulled back on the sanctions against North Korea, because that's what's squeezing them now, and the squeeze is still on until they actually do something to realize the goodwill that's in that communique from Singapore.
Yeah.
Senator, getting back to the Iran deal, there was no treaty put in place that went through Congress, and that's why President Trump was able to exit that deal.
Right.
But do you expect that the timeline to go down the road with North Korea, we will get to a treaty?
I do.
Is that your preferred route?
Not much attention was paid to it, but a while ago, President Trump or Secretary Pompeo probably both said this would be a treaty that would require Senate approval. And that's really important, because that means that 2/3 of the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, are going to have to agree with whatever agreement comes out of the discussions with North Korea. And then you've got a national commitment to it. You won't have the next administration pull back because it's a bad deal, because it's got to be a good deal. And as the Trump administration negotiates with the North Koreans, they've got to know that in the end, 2/3 of the members of the Senate are going to have to agree with it. So it's going to be a good deal for the United States, and it also obviously has to be a good deal for the North Koreans as well. I want to say one quick word. One of the things that my guess is will be on the table with Secretary Pompeo and his colleague, whoever sits with him from North Korea, is to break the cooperation between North Korea and Iran, particularly on the development of missiles. They have been tied closely together.
That's big.
And it's big, and it'll really improve American security if the North Koreans break from the Iranians on missiles.
And you think they'll do it?
Well, for a good agreement, they will.
But that's why I found it so perplexing and confounding what we did with ZTE, throwing them another lifeline despite an additional fine on ZTE. But the U.S. kept that Chinese company alive when it was originally found to be selling U.S. technology or handing it off to North Korea and Iran. And see, and again, that completes the circle. It's China, North Korea, and Iran.
And just to say, I spoke with the president on Friday before he left for this trip on the phone, and I asked him about that, and he said, I got a call from the president of China 2 weeks before I'm going to sit down with the leader of North Korea, and he said to me, I need this favor, help us with ZTE, and I did it. Not only because I knew that we wanted China in our corner ahead of the North Korea meeting, but also he got the $1.4 billion, as well as the Commerce Department deciding who's on that committee. What are your thoughts on the ZTE issue? Because Dagan brings up the elephant in the room.
Yeah, well, I mean, ZTE was a bad actor here. It really broke its word in a way that directly compromises American security. So the president reacted intuitively, personally. It's the way a businessman would react. Congress is on this, as you know.
Right.
There's language in the defense bill. It's before the Senate right now that will stop ZTE from doing business. So this is a story that's not finished.
So many important insights from you, Senator. It's great to see you.
You too.
Thanks so much, Senator Joe Lieberman. We'll be right back.